This is Doug from Dynamic Computing, and this is a special 10-minute Amiga Retro Cast series called the Chickenhead Chronicles. Now, normally I focus on Amigas, which are my one true hobbyist love, but I started way back in 1981, 1982 with a Commodore VIC-20. Absolutely loved it. I saw it at a county fair back in probably late 1980, maybe early 1981. And they were showing off the VIC-20 and they were playing Amok on it, which is that Berserk clone that runs in unexpanded VIC. I've got it on here, it's really cool. Just blew my 12-year-old mind. I'm looking at this thing like, yeah, I gotta have it. And that triggered something in the old head that I needed a computer. So worked it out with my mother, and we ended up getting a VIC-20 a couple of months later. Absolutely loved it, did tons of programming on it. It's where I got my feet wet in computers, and it set me on a path to where I am today, which is owning an IT consulting company. I can credit that all to starting out with my VIC-20, learning how to program, becoming familiar, becoming comfortable with computers. Now, my original VIC-20 disappeared sometime back in the 90s. That's the last time I remember seeing it. On a whim back in the 80s, I'd taken a permanent Sharpie marker and colored the entire thing black. So I had a black VIC-20. It looked horrible because it was with a Sharpie marker, but it just up and disappeared. So, long story short, I got back into the Amiga community a couple of months back, and it got me thinking, gosh, I kind of miss my 8-bit computers too. So, hopping on eBay, I thought I'd bid on a VIC-20. So I put a bid in for a VIC-20, and I thought, well, you know, you so seldom are guaranteed to win anything on eBay. I'll bid on a second one too. Why not? You know, what's the worst that can happen? Well, the worst happened is I got 2 VIC-20s. And so now I'm the proud owner of one of the 2-prong VIC-20s and one of the round connector, the newer VIC-20s. Both of them work just fine. I love them to pieces. At the same time, I thought, well, why not look at a Commodore 64 too? I still had a C64, but it died in about 2005 when I robbed parts out of it to repair a customer's Commodore 64, and I never got mine working again. So I bid on this little guy, and about a day before the bid closed, suddenly the bid shot up to $3,350, I believe, and we were at like 90 bucks, 95 bucks. $3,350. I'm like, no thanks. So I emailed the guy on eBay and I said, hey, somebody's playing a game with you. They're, you know, making fake accounts. They're bidding this thing up. So he got a hold of eBay. He got those 2 guys kicked off. The bidding went back down into the upper 90s. I ended up with a Commodore 64 that arrived broken. The keyboard had been absolutely shattered. The top part of the keyboard here was absolutely shattered and shipping. So tried to power it on, nothing, just red light. So I thought, well, I'll rob parts out of mine, see if I can get one working. In a nutshell, this is my original case that I had on my C64 when I was a kid, back in maybe 84, 85, I got my C64. It's my original shell, his original guts, and his original keyboard that I won off of eBay. The thing still didn't boot, so I started taking it apart, and the 6510 CPU, a pin was actually burned off of it. You could actually see where it fried and burned off of it. So I don't know, bummer. So cleaned everything up real nice, put the CPU back in, broke a pin off of a ROM socket, an extra ROM socket I had for my Amiga 2000, and took that pin, just shoved it down in the little socket, everything made contact, boom, Commodore 64 up and running just beautifully. But I wasn't done. I still had an itch that needed scratching. I had one friend back in the early 80s. Oh, Miss Pac-Man turned off, my TV went to sleep. I had one friend back in the 80s who owned a Commodore 128. Jealous as all get out that he had one and I didn't. I still had my C64. So loved his Commodore 128. It was a great machine. I ended up going the Amiga route, getting my Amiga 500 in '87. So I never owned a C128. One of them came up on eBay. Duh. Okay, let's spend some more money, Douglas. Here, let's just keep spending retro cash. Why not? And look what came in the mail last week. Nice, bright, shiny Commodore 128. No power supply yet. I have one coming in from Poland, and the original buyer also gave me a sweet deal on a broken Commodore 128 power supply. So I've got two of them coming in. I'll fix his and use the one from Poland. So that got me thinking. Here I've got all this retro equipment. There's Miss Pac-Man. Here I've got all this 8-bit retro equipment. It's going to be fun. Have fun with it. What am I going to do with it? I know. Let's create a new channel. And so was born the Chickenhead Chronicles. Now, what I'm planning on doing with this channel, a little different than my Amiga channel, which is mainly going over the cool things you can do with an Amiga in today's world, but not really concentrating on what the Amigas were back in the 80s and 90s. What I'm going to do with this series, with the Chickenhead Chronicles, I want to review and cover some games that were available on the VIC-20, the C64, and the 128. I want to cover some of the cool things you can do with them today, some of the neat ways you can keep them current today, keep them running and enjoy them. And I'm going to try to do all of it with the help of my 14-year-old son, Daniel. He's a cool kid and my best buddy, and he loves games just as much as I do. He's interested in my Amiga channel. He's one of my first subscribers, but he's always kind of been, oh Dad, what's that? Oh Dad, what? That's kind of cool. So a couple of weeks ago, I got my new VIC-20s. We threw in Miss Pac-Man, Cosmic Cruncher, Gorf, and we spent hours playing. Just this kid wasn't even a glimmer in my eye when the VIC-20 came out. And here he is wanting to play these retro games with me. And so I thought, we're going to do it together. So this video series is going to concentrate on Commodore 8-bit computers, the fun you can have with them, including fun with a 14-year-old son. I hope you enjoy episode 1 of the Chickenhead